right, it's 3 o'clock. Let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm excited to be here with you today at World Staffing Summit. My name is Rodrigo Alcan, and I'm head of sales and operations for Joined Up by Beeline in North America. For those not familiar with Joined Up provides a workforce management solution built specifically for the dynamic world of high volume staffing, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I'm joined by industry experts in a conversation around how to effectively manage the high volume shift-based labor category, a topic that is absolutely near and dear to my heart, and I know equally as passionate are the panelists that we have here today as well too. So we're going to cover data and trends, some strategies to help drive better outcomes for your customers, your candidates, and of course your business. And then how do you leverage the right technology as it relates to this particular category as well. But before we get started, I'd love for you guys to hear from our panelists and get a quick intro. And Janelle, I will start with you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. I'm Janelle Biehler. I am Adecco Canada's president and country head. I've been in the staffing industry for about 10 years, 7 of those with Adecco, and I spent most of my time in the US before moving up to Canada for this past year. So I'm excited to be part of the panel today to share some insights on North America. Thanks for having me, Rodrigo.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Todd, we'll come over to you now.
Excellent. Well, it's great to be here today. Todd Biehler, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Integrity Staffing Solutions. We started the business in 1997. We're very focused and always have been on high volume e-commerce, logistics, and fulfillment staffing. So it's a great session to be in. Our focus is here in the United States. So I look forward to also providing a North American perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. And then Chris, we'll bring it over to you now.
Great. Good afternoon. Christopher Dwyer, SVP of Research at Arden Partners, as well as the Managing Director of the brand new Future of Work Exchange, which is the industry's only dedicated Future of Work destination site. Been in the industry for about 16 years now. Spent the first several years of my career at a place called the Aberdeen Group, and about 9 years ago made the move over to Arden Partners, which is a supply management procurement focused research group. But obviously I came over to kickstart its coverage of everything related to talent, contingent workforce, and the future of work, and really excited to be here. Thanks, Rodrigo.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. And last but not least, from over in the UK, so thank you for being on the slate, Adam, but over to you.
I was going to say, Rodrigo, it ain't 3 p.m. here. It's 8 in the evening. So thanks so much for having me. And he's right. That's the weird accent is because I'm coming to you from London. My background is for about 10 years. I started, built and sold a pretty big high volume agency in the UK. I think one of the biggest into the big supermarkets and DHL and players like that. But then also as a result of seeing, in my view, that a lot about high volume staffing was broken. I was one of the co-founders who started a business called Joined Up, which is a platform to bring together hirers, suppliers, and workers in real time. And I guess the last few years I spent building that prior to being acquired by Beeline 7-8 months ago. Thanks for inviting me, Rodrigo.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have your perspective. And I love the kind of diversity that we have within the panel in supporting this labor category, both from geography perspective, technology, and then of course, research and supplier side as well too. But let's go ahead and get started. And what I'll say too for the audience is please leverage the chat as you have questions or you want to make some unique points. Feel free to type them in there as well. And we'll kind of sprinkle those into the panelists as we have time. And of course, towards the end, we'll have time for some Q&A as well. But, I think we can all align that it's probably, a super unique time in this labor category, right? And staffing in general across North America and really everywhere, with supply chain pressures, COVID, workforce demanding really different conditions than we've ever experienced before. Help wanted signs everywhere as well too. But I think when we really think about the high volume characteristics, like what makes that feel and act different than any other labor category out there as well? And I'm curious to hear your thoughts around it. And for the audience, please feel free to answer as well too. But Todd, I'm going to direct this question for you to start with, being that this is your expertise as well too. But what characteristics from high volume that make it feel and act different than any other labor category? Todd, can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, you asked me. I apologize. I was
no
waiting.
worries.
No worries. I'll tell you, everything is urgent. Like, that was why I gave that little pause to create the suspense, because I'll tell you, everything in my volume right now is urgency.
It's all about the timing, Todd. It's all about the timing.
It's all about the timing. Really, seriously, everything's urgent, and the demands are urgent. Change is urgent. Things are happening at a pace faster than we've ever seen it happen. And the big challenge is having teams adopt to the change at the pace at which the change needs to occur. And I think that's something that we're all faced with right now.
Yeah, well said. And I want to circle back to kind of having the teams adopt to the speed of change and that challenge as well too. But Janelle, I kind of will ask the same question too, especially you having a lens both from the U.S. market and now the Canadian market as well too. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree more on the urgency piece. And I think that we've also seen a shift too, especially with the pandemic in the past 2 years, because high volume staffing is typically not the type of jobs that can be done remote. So there is even an urgency in filling the orders and filling the opportunities with clients that is different, because the candidate pools have changed. People have shifted into wanting roles that could maybe be more remote, and so it's changed the dynamics of the people we have available to us as well. So I think you're dealing with this urgency coupled with this drastic shift in the candidate pool that we're all trying to solve for.
Yeah, that's a great point. And also the need for transparency across the whole process as well too, right? Adam, I think this kind of speaks to your wheelhouse too a little bit, because I mean, essentially this is why you kind of built Joined Up too. But you know, having now a lens from the UK perspective, and then been dipping your time into the US market with a recent acquisition, what's your lens or point of view on that?
I mean, first of all, I think the challenges seem pretty consistent from speaking to people running businesses across Europe and the States. From what I've heard, my understanding, there's slight nuances. It sounds to me like in Europe and possibly California as well, there's a much bigger issue around complexity of rate calculations and how to handle that than maybe in the rest of the States. But for me, you know, everything we've been talking about, Todd's been talking about, Janelle's been talking about, kind of pace, speed, urgency. It all adds up to pressure. I think where you have large numbers and that amount of pressure, and you combine that with typically pretty low margins, if you're a P&L holder, what makes that tricky is how do you put in place an operational infrastructure that can deliver for your clients at a cost that still allows you to make money? And that is pretty tricky. And so certainly what I spend a lot of time talking about is how there's all sorts of technologies out there. And if you can put them together in the right way, ideally you can kind of do more with fewer people. And that is very, very critical in the, as I say, when you're trying to build an infrastructure on relatively tight margins.
Yeah, all really, really good points. And Chris, before I pivot to you, I want to come back to Todd's comment around, because I think this is really critical, because oftentimes we talk about, from a staffing perspective, supporting our customers and our candidates, of course, too, but it's has this unique pressure on our teams to adapt and to move as fast as the business needs us to move too. So talk to us a little bit about maybe some strategies around getting the teams, internal teams, to move at the pace that is required to support this labor category.
Yeah, for us, what we're finding is really balancing. You know, there's this move to automate what we call the hands work, right? And automate as much as that is possible, and keeping our teams really aligned with the hard work. And we talk often about that, but it's so critical in that adoption process, because the more that we can really narrow in on what we're expecting folks to do and be really good at that, the faster that we can get them to adopt. And so by the real balance is finding that balance between automation and personal experience. And that is a real challenge right now in the high volume arena.
Yeah, great. Todd, you're just setting me up for a later conversation. So it's perfect the way you're bringing those topics up too, because I certainly want to hit on those as well. And I love the analogy of the hands versus the hard work as well too. I think that's that's really unique as well. Chris, I think a lot of this experience and what Todd and Adam and Janelle has spoke about too, certainly oftentimes might feel anecdotal as well, but from a data perspective, what are you seeing out there specifically within this labor category and maybe over the next 2 to 3 years as well?
Yeah, good question, Rodrigo. I mean, this is in high volume shift-based labor. I mean, I really feel like there's this, pre-pandemic, it was maybe 38 to 40%, not like extended non-employee. And now it's up to 44%, 45%, mid-pandemic times. And when I look at, and if you pardon the direction of my eyes, looking at my figure share on my screen, 2021, 44% of the average shift-based organization's labor was considered contingent. And when I look at the growth figures of all of these other industries, engineering, admin, healthcare, life sciences, financial services, public sector, consistent growth. But I do foresee a world maybe 3-4 years from now where you have anywhere from 55 to 60% of shift-based work being done by the extended workforce. I mean, that's incredible. That's truly incredible. And I think a big reason for that, I was talking about this during my earlier session today at the World Staffing Summit, that more and more businesses have realized that they need agility to survive and adapt and thrive in these changing times. And it's being felt everywhere. And I think when you look at organizations that are in this industry, this specific sector, they're getting hit harder when it comes to reimagining traditional talent acquisition, workforce management processes, right? That was the number one pressure across all industries, but especially within this sector. 92% of these organizations, when we ask them, how have you dealt with the changing times over the past 18 months, 2 years? It's, well, we've had to reimagine everything we're doing from a workforce management perspective. And that speaks volumes, right? I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, it may have been, we need more visibility. We need higher cost savings. It could have been, more compliance. It could have been one of those more traditional measures. But today it's reimagining how we find talent, which I think is pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. Those stats are pretty powerful too. And talking about 55% of shift-based work being done through contingent workforce as well too. Janelle and Todd, I mean, when you hear that from an ownership of staffing and support and the delivery function that you guys have as a staffing company, I mean, how does that resonate? What do you feel when you hear those type of stats?
I can tell you that in the Canadian perspective, Canada is a country that for the past 2 years has gone in and out of lockdowns. So watching, business needs shift literally month on month created just a very different dynamic. And when you talk about rethinking, right, the way that we are going to take care of clients, we actually saw that our workers went from mostly full-time roles to over 60% part-time roles. And every time that we went through a lockdown, that number would go up. So what Chris is talking about, I can say that I've seen that exactly in practice, where you have these needs changing, where candidates need to be able to adapt to shift work, maybe can't commit to working full-time at one place. And so I think there's a big need for us to not only reimagine how that can look, but figure out how technology can play a part in that, to figure out how you can offer that to candidates, where they might be able to pick up shift work across different organizations or different companies that allow them to create a full-time schedule that's more flexible to their needs.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. And I think, so do you see the need for part-time and for the client to be able to offer that solution as well to continue to increase, lockdown or not? I mean, they're seeing efficiency gains there, or what are you hearing?
Yeah, I think it's opened up new candidate pools that we didn't necessarily have before. And to give you a very Canadian example, international students make up a big part of our workforce here, yet they're limited to only being able to work 20 hours per week. So we were actually able to implement across multiple clients kind of a weekend warrior program, where you could take international students and just give them their 20 hours over a weekend. It kind of bridged the gap during the pandemic when we had less workers available, but now it's been something that has stayed throughout and has actually become part of the way that we now approach staffing at some of these high volume clients. So I think we're going to continue to uncover unique ways to do things that then are going to become part of the way that we operate moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Janelle more. What we're seeing is the education that's necessary for the clients to understand how they can reimagine shift work as well. We, especially as we think about e-commerce and logistics, you have the 410 schedules or the and they get locked into that mindset. And when we educate them on the amount of workers that they have access to that are looking for flex shift work or a true flexible dynamic work and the efficiency that can bring to their operation, we can then begin to really help them optimize their use of the available labor force.
Yeah, great topic, and I think something I want to spend a little bit more time about optimizing the workforce, and I want to unpack that a little bit more as well too. But before we get there, I'd love to ask Chris, when the labor force participation rate is a huge topic today, right? Everyone's having conversations, and I think what Janelle and Todd mentioned as well too, and Adam has alluded to as well, with creating some of this flexibility. I mean, with the demand continuing to increase, the education back to the customers, but also what else are you seeing around the labor force participation rate? Are we still going to see it kind of continue to be flat like this, or what can we do to unlock some of that as well to fill some of these roles that we have?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think one really interesting facet of this sector specifically is looking at participation in something like direct sourcing, right? Which has not historically been a core talent strategy for high volume shift based labor organizations. You're seeing more and more of these companies starting to rethink some of your traditional. I know that's going to be a common refrain today, but rethinking, reimagining traditional channels of talent, and direct sourcing, I think, is going to be a big part of that. I know, again, it's something I talked about a couple of hours ago, and it's hard to get away from the direct sourcing topic because it's so hot. But these are hiring managers that weren't used to doing things the way that you would see in more traditional white collar hiring manager positions, where you could very easily find workers remotely. You could find users via so many different automated digital staffing platforms, and now you're starting to see that shift. I mean, I've gotten introduced to so many new talent marketplaces that are focused on high volume blue collar LI shift based labor over the past year that it makes me, I mean, I'm like, wow, am I a failure as an analyst? Because I didn't know, 30, 40 of these companies before the pandemic, right? But I really do think that, again, it all comes down to reimagining, adapting, evolving what they're doing. I mean, I think something like 15% of LI companies pre-pandemic had a direct sourcing program in place, which seems like a lot. But, when you look at the other side of that, you see another 40 to 50% expect to implement direct sourcing by the end of 2023, which, that's an indicator to me that could be a pretty viable strategy for these organizations, because you can't use a lot of the traditional methods that you've used in the past, especially where we are today.
That's right. Yeah. Adam, I want to pivot a little bit too, because I know a lot of our conversations with Joined Up and our suppliers and clients as well too, is that we're consistently hearing that customers are asking for more data, more information, being compressed. Margins continue to be compressed, and staffing is kind of working harder to get the same output and outcome, right? And some of that more strategic work is now being kind of distracted away from the job. How can this squeeze be overcome, or what are you hearing as it relates to that?
Well, that's a big question for any P&L holder, isn't it? I mean, as you'd expect from me, right? I'm a kind of evangelist for the use of technology in this component. And by the way, I totally buy both Janelle and Todd and Chris's early position that it is about how you stick the human into this process. So I'm not a kind of pure play marketplace guy at all. My view is that you look for interesting ways to automate away the boring, repetitive parts of the process. You free up your people to have better lives. I mean, the experience of an on-site manager is really tough. I'm always saying to people in my organization, remember when you speak to people in high volume LI environments, they're getting screamed at by customers in high pressure, tense times. They got upward pressure from workers themselves, often very close to minimum wage. It's a really tough role. So anything you can do to take care of more of the boring work, and technology helps with that, it is very valuable. Obviously, on the candidate side, I think it's beginning to be table stakes, right? So the opportunity to offer your candidates transparency so they can see how much they're earning as they're earning it via an app or a portal, the ability for workers to be able to set their own preferred shift patterns through that kind of platform, which automatically taken into account when the supplier's planning tools are doing automated planning. This stuff that just, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago was rocket science, I think it's table stakes. I don't think it's, it's not even that super smart any longer. And interestingly, we've got a couple of clients who've got all of that in place and then going beyond that with application of really interesting AI, etc. For the end hirer side of things, I think what some of these tools can do through this radical transparency of sharing data amongst the three parties to the transaction, the supplier, the hirer, and the worker, can also be very, very helpful. Whereas previously everyone was living in a world of data siloed spreadsheets, if you can now have a tool in place where end hirers are placing their orders on a system, those are popping up in front of the suppliers on their own planning screens, and the end hirers can then see that plan build in real time as names are added to shifts. Well, again, what all of these things are doing, whether they are innovations on supplier, agency, end hirer, or worker, is they're allowing people to do more with less. So it's this kind of recurring theme that if the tools are used in the right way, it should all show up in one place, and that is increasing the ratio of gross profit earning temps per salaried employee. And I'll shut up in 1 second, but we've got really good data on this across a few $1 billion now of annual spend in high volume. We can see exactly the number of consultants on the platform. We can see exactly the number of workers they have out, and across that number, we can see 27 to 35% increase in the numbers of those temps per salaried employee over use of this kind of technology. And that's very powerful. It drops straight to the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it speaks to understanding where you can augment some of that effort and the importance of technology playing in there, and where you can still continue to humanize the process because you have people doing the things that are really sticky and really important versus some of those low value administrative tasks as well too. Janelle, I want to pivot to you a little bit because I know you've always been, for as long as I've known you, you've been passionate about this as well. But how has the role of the recruiter changed over the last, let's call it 18, 24 months, based off everything that we've just been talking about? What have you seen?
Adam, what you were talking about in terms of kind of that automation of the top of the funnel, or Todd, what you were talking about with taking kind of that hands work and figuring out how to automate it. I think the understanding of the candidate funnel and understanding where you can put in automation and technology to help expedite things so that the recruiter can focus on the people piece, the heart work, has probably been the biggest shift that I've seen. The recruiters have started to shift. There's always going to be a need for some part of the people business, whether it's in front of the client and the associates at the on-site, whether that's directly talking to people to try and get them placed. But the more that we can remove from their desk and the more that we can try to automate so that they get qualified candidates in front of them that they can turn around and now make the match with that client, the easier their job becomes. I think there's also been, though, with that type of automation and that type of introduction and maybe acceleration of technology, because I feel like we've had to really move quickly to try and put some of that into the business. As mentioned, it's table stakes now to try and figure out how you can do things more efficiently. I think part of the role of the recruiter, though, has also become tougher because they're trying to catch up, right? There is a lot of change management that comes with that and trying to kind of pull our groups along to make sure that everybody understands how to utilize the technology. You can always put automations and technologies into the process, but if you're not properly training and showing people how to optimize them, it's it's not going to give you your full benefit.
Yeah. No, super powerful. Great point. And it's funny because I think maybe Chris, I think on your panel that we listened to earlier, or somewhere else where I saw we talk about this kind of war for talent that's been going on, and someone said it really well. And I'm sorry, I'm not giving credit to the right person, but it's the war for talent is over, and guess what? The talent won, right? And when you think about that, and you think about the amount of options that talent now has, and about attracting top talent, and going back to creating some different ways to do the work than they've done before. And I think this is a good segue into optimizing the workforce, because I know this is something you and I have talked about several times, and I think you have such a great definition of explaining this. But when you were to define, optimizing the workforce, can you shed some light on that and what that really means, and unpack that a little bit?
Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what that means to us and ours. First, it's really understanding in getting into that operating reality of your clients. And, so often it's all about number of FTE or headcount that I want in the building. And we really try to shift that conversation to output, right? What are we trying to do at the end of the day? What's that result? And whether it's an hours in the building equation, let us come up with the best way to optimize that, whether we're using on-demand labor for pieces of a job that aren't really generating that output that they're looking for, that take very little training time, and we know how to insert labor where it's most needed to get the output at the end of the day. And for us, at the end of the day, that's what an optimized workforce looks like. It's putting the right, who do I have access to in this labor pool, and who can complete what function at the best rate for the client. So at the end of the day, that's what we're looking to do.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think all of us probably, I'm sure on this call, and many people as in our audience, probably they get it, right? They understand that that's a need, but going to the customer and having that conversation, and again, to your point, educating them as to a real need and how they do their work today. Tell us about challenges that you're facing when you go try to talk about that solution or strategy with the customer.
It's a long cycle, right? It's a long education cycle. I think the best thing is proof of concept from other initiatives. It's also testing small, allowing them to see it function within a smaller subset, and then moving them along that journey. It's purposeful. It's not something that a lot of organizations just aren't set up. Their systems aren't set up that way. Their timekeeping isn't set up that way. And if they want to run through their systems, that even makes that challenge a little bit more difficult. So it's really helping create strong integrations where, they can integrate into our systems. We can then operate in function in the way that we do best in optimizing high volume labor. So it's not a short cycle in educating the customer. It's really a longer term education. However, we have seen a number of customers now coming to us quickly and saying, help us solve this, because they just don't have access to the labor.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think, once the need is definitely there, it's almost like their backs up against the wall, and they really want to. You may have been talking to them about it for months, but now they've got unfilled jobs and they're trying to get as creative as possible. Chris, from your point of view and the buyer perspective, and I know you probably have a lot of conversations with procurement professionals, et cetera, on how they acquire and procure talent. What are you hearing as it relates to some of these different types of strategies or initiatives as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Rodrigo. I think it's shifted more from, what's our long-term talent strategy to what can we do right now? Because I think that's where the need is. It's not. Here's the thing: predictive analytics, scenario building, that's great for long-term workforce planning, but in this sector, it's not helpful right now, right this second, right? So we need real-time total talent intelligence to really figure out where are our gaps, because we're running a warehouse, we're running a plant, right? We've got people working on the shop floor that if someone doesn't show up for a shift, we need to fill that role immediately. So it's from the procurement side, from the HR and talent acquisition sides as well. The more hiring managers, the more executives I talk to that are in this sector, they're trying to place the utmost focus on trying to understand, the talent needs right now, and what they can do to, to avoid adverse events in terms of, okay, we have a COVID outbreak, right? We have to shut down half a warehouse, or we have 30% of our staff that are quarantining, even if it's for 5 days, 7 days, whatever the CDC is deciding to do this week. There's a lot there to unpack for these executives that are in a really tough spot. And not only that, you're not dealing with white collar work that, I can just tap into my personal network really quickly and find someone who can fit a project into their schedule, right? I mean, it's coding, Java developer, web design, development, all that stuff. I mean, you can squeeze that in at midnight if you're really hungry and you're a gig worker, can do that. When you're talking about this sector with high volume or shift-based labor, it's a lot harder to fill those roles, with the snap of the fingers, right? I mean, that's a lot of pressure today. And Rodrigo, I think you put it perfectly. And it wasn't me who said that. I mean, I'll take credit for it all day. But the war for talent, talent did win. I mean, I absolutely hate the phrase "Great Resignation." The only reason I use it is for clicks. But I like to call it a talent revolution, right? I mean, it doesn't matter if you are a picker packer. It doesn't matter if you are, someone who's on your laptop at 1 a.m. building a new website, right? You want not just better compensation, but you don't want burnout. You want better, safer working conditions. You want the ability to come into work and know, okay, I have a purpose and I'm fulfilling that purpose. My job isn't, it isn't just a job, it's part of my life. And all these different things, both tech and non-tech together, are really coming together to make it, unfortunately, pretty hard for organizations in the sector to fill the talent that they need at the right time.
Yeah. Go ahead, Janelle. Perfect.
Chris, on that note, I think when you're talking about kind of the shift in mindset too, I think the flexibility and the need for workers who want that flexibility in roles in high volume staffing that typically don't have flexibility is part of the challenge we're faced with too, right? How do we answer that need that the candidates want and the associates need, and still be able to staff these high volume operations? I think that's the big $1 million question that we're all trying to figure out. How do you pull all that together to kind of serve everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's another question that tends to come up as well too, specifically with this labor category, because I think, Janelle, you mentioned it earlier starting off, is this work can't be done remote, right? That they have to go on site and do a lot of this work. But from a recruitment perspective, how important from a staffing standpoint is proximity within this labor category to either the customer or the candidate in today's kind of remote world? And I'll open it to anybody who wants to answer that one. That one's a tough one, but
I'll just volunteer a sort of tiny case study, which I think is quite interesting. We've got a candidate in the UK who I believe are the largest building materials company around the world. So they've got 1,100 shops around the UK. And they have a model where when they're trying to fill a role for drivers and others, they have, in addition to the reaching out to third-party temporary labor, they also have agency-like perms, which I always found quite interesting. So they have several hundred drivers who, in fact, are on permanently employed contracts, but within their contracts, they require them to travel a significant distance, and they kind of make it worth their while. So when we were implementing a platform like we do, which links, the people who are doing the ordering, the agency, and the workers, they asked us to build in the ability that when the order was put up, the priority that pings up on the list of available workers, it sticks at the top of that pool, that class of worker that can travel. And within the system, there's a real-time call on a Google Maps API, so we know which one of those people are available. And if there is none available, only then will it serve up one of the people from the agency database, again listed according to proximity to site. So it's just an interesting idea. I wonder whether there are other models like that one could use, messing around with contracts and proximity.
Yeah, that's a good lens, Adam. Janelle, you were going to mention something about it as well.
I was just going to mention that I think when it does come to a lot of these roles, the proximity is important, right? And trying to figure out how you can migrate talent pools within a certain geography. Because, if you have somebody across town that suddenly has workers available, they can't always travel, right? There's transportation issues sometimes. There's a lot of things that can prevent people from working at a different site. So I do think proximity is still important, and being able to understand kind of your talent pools within a certain geography and then figuring out how you can leverage that shift scheduling across clients is becoming more and more important to a geography of clients, to try and understand how you can share in that talent pool.
Interesting. So it's more about where the candidates are collectively and how to. Yep, that's a good point. Todd, were you gonna say something? I'm sorry if I cut you off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think proximity in this category, if we're talking about talent, that it's critical. We find, obviously one is pay. Then how far is it from my home? And so even for our central teams who take people reaching out or connecting with them, we want to be able to look at, out of what's available, what's absolutely closest to their home to start with, because proximity to the talent is critical to I not only accepting the position, but the longevity of the position as well. We can correlate those two things together.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So let's pivot to technology. I think that has obviously been a theme amongst the conversation today. I think if you had the chance to join any other sessions as well too, this was kind of top of conversation as well. When you think about technology, and not only technology in general, but the right technology, obviously it can create a better experience and enhance operational efficiency. Something that we're seeing every single day. With this particular labor category, where do you see technology fit in, specifically with either AI or the role of the recruiter today? And maybe Todd, let me start with you.
Well, so from my perspective and organizationally, right now we're in a place where the candidate journey as it relates to technology has to be diverse, because the candidates are in different phases, right? Some are absolutely app friendly. They want to be on an app. That's what they gravitate towards. Then you have others that aren't, that want that personal touch and that experience, and still working through their computer or walking into an office, believe it or not. And we're finding that when we try to isolate, even at a data level, one path, that we're losing candidate share. So as we look at technology right now, we're looking at it like somebody mentioned revolution earlier. I'll say this is an evolution, not a revolution, because the faster we try to get the candidate to adapt to the change, we're missing out on a portion of that candidate base that we can't. So that makes it more complicated, because you're running. If we had our choice right now, we'd be 100% digital, right? Everything would be digital. That's not what the candidates are looking for. So we're having to offer both, and that creates operational challenges, I think.
Yeah, great point, Janelle. Go ahead.
As an organization, Todd, I think what you touched on is that there has to be multiple ways to meet the candidate where they need to be met. So I almost think that we have to shift. In this type of high volume industry, we've typically been very high touch, right? We're in front of the client, in front of the candidate, face to face. But as you mentioned, people are kind of operating in different ways now. So I almost feel like we need to have an approach for the no touch candidate, right? That wants to do everything digital, but then we still have to find a way that's maybe augmented by some technologies, but allows the human touch. And you're still going to have candidates and clients who still need to be very high touch. So I think that's part of what this whole shakeup around recruitment and high volume staffing is about, is that we're now being moved into multiple ways, different channels that we have to reach out to candidates. That's a big shift.
Yeah, and what happens, and Janelle, that's such a great point, because what we see is that it also puts at risk the experience.
Yeah.
And for us, that experience from the front end is so important. And if the pathways, those journeys are not precise, and if there's gaps in those journeys, that candidate will move on to the next order. So it really does create unique challenges.
And it's not, what's interesting is this conversation started off with, does a worker like being spoken to lots in a sort of high touch way, or do they prefer technology? But actually, even within technology, it's incredibly hard to keep up, because there are some people who prefer to be communicated to via WhatsApp, some via SMS, some via email, some via different forms of instant messaging. So it all leads to a more complex environment. I completely agree. But it all adds up to this concept of choice. Ideally, we should be using a combination, I guess, of human interaction and technology to speak to people in the way that they want to be spoken to, so that you don't leave and neglect any portion of that candidate pool.
That's right. Yeah, it's certainly an and not an or, right? And to Janelle's point, and Adam's, all of you guys made this point, is you got to meet the candidates where they are as well too. And a lot of the conversation that we've been having is around attraction of the candidate and engagement, and originally in the top of the funnel. But I think even more importantly is the redeployment of great talent as well too. And I think that's oftentimes a miss for a lot of us, because we're engaging in the new orders that we get from our customers, and then we just kind of move on to next because we're so busy, right? Tell us a little about where can technology augment there, or some best practices that you all may have that you've seen around redeployment and an opportunity there. And then to last, I know it's kind of three questions in one, but Chris, if you have any data to support anything around redeployment of candidates, a desire there, we'd love to hear it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just start with the more anecdotal first, and then dive into some of the points that I have. I mean, I really think that again, direct sourcing, and again, it's tough for me to not talk about it because I'm so passionate about it. But I'm not saying that all companies in the sector have to utilize direct sourcing starting tomorrow. But if we're going to be talking about candidate experience and talent redeployment, I think one critical piece that these organizations can take away from direct sourcing, and I even call it direct sourcing 2.0, which I feel is the natural next evolution of direct sourcing, where you're involving more technology, you're doing more AI, you're doing more AI-led candidate assessment, you're doing more with nurture and collaboration. It's that nurture piece, that sort of that cultural awareness, like how are we giving our candidates and our workers the best possible experience from beginning to end, right? And it's not just putting them in a talent pool at the end of the day or a talent community. It's, you want these candidates to feel like, okay, I just did a 6-week assignment. I filled in on a dozen different shifts over the past 4 weeks, whatever it is. We want them to have such a great positive experience, not just with the work itself, but with the company brand, the culture. Again, this is why it's so important to look at the future of work through a non-technological lens sometimes, because things like empathy and sort of feeling like you've got a purpose when you go into work, those are the aspects that candidates want to look at. And so when you have this, again, war for talent in which the talent won, talent redeployment is really based on the fact that, the candidates have to have a want. They have to want to come back. They want to feel like they can be not an FTE or an employee, but they can be part of the organization in a more meaningful way, and the organization wants them there. So that positive experience, I think, is pretty critical, and that's where I think things like talent nurture really come into mind. Taking a page from the direct sourcing playbook. How do businesses in this sector effectively nurture their candidates and ensure that they have the best possible candidate experience, best possible work experience. So when the time comes in the future, whether it's 6 weeks from now or 6 months from now, that candidate is going to remember, but you know what, I do want to go work for them again because it was a good all-around experience. It's more than just compensation. It really is about culture, inclusiveness, safety, all of those things sort of wrapped together in this neat little candidate experience package.
That's right. And the indirect kind of benefits of that as well too, from a referral standpoint. And now it's much easier for people to tell everyone about their experience, good or bad. Oftentimes they'll tell about a bad experience and a good one. So I think that's incredibly critical. Todd and Janelle, any thoughts on redeployment of candidates? I know this is something that we've always talked about for a while, but now more prevalent than ever, I think.
I'll jump in. So technology is making the ability to redeploy, understand what candidates are coming available, what jobs are the best fit, and matching them to those candidates better than ever before. We're still working towards that, where redeployment right now, in fact, I had a conversation today where we were really looking at how our technology is currently set up from a redeployment perspective, and what are those touch points where we're still from a human perspective, right, missing those opportunities. Because the more we miss the opportunity to, as Chris said, nurture that candidate prior to the end of that assignment with information about what's upcoming, about what their next step plans are, the more that we miss that opportunity, the higher our costs go to acquire new candidates. So redeployment for us is a large focus in our technology evolution right now. And right now we're using we can get as many people back in the workforce as possible with the shortest amount of time between assignment.
That's right. Yep. Critical. Janelle, anything to add there?
I would just agree on the nurture piece, especially when you're in high volume staffing. It's often a quick placement when you're putting somebody to work. And what I love about automated nurture campaigns, they can help you lay the foundation for the relationship, right? So you're able to start getting a consistent message to your associates and start to build upon that. And then to Todd's point, being able to dig into that to understand what people are looking for. Is there upskill opportunities? How can we get them into that next role? Starts to build that stickiness with the associates, right? And hopefully the opportunity to continue to redeploy them and give them, career opportunities that are beyond the one that they're currently working. So I would just agree with what both of you said. To me, that is at the heart of redeployment, is how do you use some of those nurturings to build those relationships with your associates to continue to have the opportunity to redeploy them.
Yeah, Janelle, you bring up a really good point around that. Those, if we think about the candidates that we say disappear, we're no longer in communication, we're not connected in any way, they're not responding, etc., and they go dark. We have set up campaigns where we're now reaching back out to those folks using technology, saying, look, we haven't heard from you in a while. Have you added a new skill? And the technology now enables them to update new skills they've picked up, which now allows us to introduce new job opportunities to them. These are things that from a manual perspective were really almost impossible and doing it at scale. And so technology really has enabled us to really manage our database at a higher level and not lose so many candidates who just end up going dark.
And on that last point, Todd, I thoroughly agree with the idea of career paths and warehouse to wheels programs, the ability to combine multiple jobs across different clients to create a full 5-day working shift. All that technology can be incredibly helpful. I think there's one area which I don't actually personally know that much about, but interestingly, I have a client I can see who's on this session. And it's a big business in the UK, a gentleman by the name of Chris Gleed, who I know is listening now. But they've done the interesting thing where they've incorporated experiential data in there. So how do you create that feedback loop? And there's a third party, this particular company, I think they use a company called Qualtrics. But this idea of polling and gauging sentiment from your worker pool, potentially, if you want to get really smart about that, building that in at particular trigger points in the process, so that, I don't know, when someone gets their first, if we know that we have a lot of people walking out the door because they're upset with incorrect pay on the first pay weeks, that can automatically trigger in the process, sort of satisfaction. And the nice thing about a lot of that, I think we're drowned with a lot of operational data of shift fill rates and numbers and God knows what else. And we don't spend enough time looking at that experiential data. And I think the combination of those things can be very powerful when you're looking at both retaining and redeploying. So thinking a little bit about that feedback loop, I think is worthwhile.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great topic. And actually, kind of to round out the conversation, we talked a lot about the candidate experience and the recruiter experience and the team experience around technology. And I think Stephen may have mentioned here in the comments too, but we missed the issue on created by customers. Is good work offered? Are there enough hours to make them stick and extra hours available in the site located in an area of high competitive density and better pay rates? Yeah, I think that's a great topic around for the customer side as well too. But one of the things that I wanted to end and kind of close that loop out is, Todd, you mentioned the journey of the candidate and being able to communicate with them based off how they want to be communicated as it relates to either the digitization or through a phone call or kind of that human touch as well too. But I think that same journey exists on the client side, and some are a little bit more advanced in using technology to either procure or communicate back and forth with a supplier, and or they still want to be able to walk down the street, open the door, and say, "Hey, I need 15 people on Monday," or down, for an on-site, et cetera. So there's a fine balance there. Are you seeing a demand or an ask from your customers around a digital solution or anything like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it's as we were speaking earlier, there are the different segments. The segment that wants digital communication, just wants to be able to put their own jobs in, wants to handle their own call outs. They want to be able to do it all digitally, information at their fingertips. Others, we still can't. You'll give them the digital tool and they'll still call up and say, "You put it in the system for me." So
Yeah.
and that's a challenge, right? So as I think there'll come a time and will evolve. If we go back, I've been in this industry now 30 plus years, and so I've watched it when we moved to email. There were customers who still wanted to pick up the phone. They didn't want to email, so it's just transition. And I think what we're going to see is more and more customers who want that digital experience because one, they have information at their fingertips faster. And I think right now it's just creating awareness.
Yeah, that's right. It is an evolution. Absolutely. So we've got a few minutes left. It looks like we've got some questions from from the audience as well. So I want to make sure we touch on those. I think one of the first questions I saw, let me make sure, is from Rich at GigSmart, and it's for Todd specifically. What has been the biggest win and biggest challenge incorporating an app-based staffing solution into his organization?
The biggest win. The biggest win for us right now is the ability to handle on-demand short turnaround jobs. That's probably the biggest win. The biggest challenge is adoption and where to put the experience in the process. And what I mean by that is, as we talked earlier about application paths, right? You have an app-based experience where it's a 100% app-based experience all the way through the application. Then for others, you may not. So where do you push that line? Where do you drive that candidate? And if you leave it open to both, managing those experiences so that they're ideal, going back to Adam's point about experience and those experience points, it has to be perfect. And with the app-based and the non-app-based journeys, it creates a little more complexity than we anticipated. And so we're moving through progressively to make that better.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you, Todd. Another question: with the consideration of the skill gap currently happening in the labor market due to various factors, i.e. automation, AI, machine learning, redeployment, are there any perceived barriers in addressing the reskilling in regard to shift-based or part-time labor? Great question. I think that's something we did not touch on, is the upskill and reskilling. Janelle, if it's okay, I'll direct this one to you, and then maybe Chris, maybe you can add some flair at the end as well too.
So I think upskilling and reskilling as it relates to shift work is interesting, because when you do try to move talent across different clients, you have to make sure that they are trained in those roles, right? Sometimes with the high volume staffing, you have very specific needs as to what the role requires. So I actually think that as we try to answer this need from our associates and our candidates who want to have more of that flexibility in shift work, the more that we can upskill and give them a variety of skills, the more marketable they are and the better ability they have to shift across different clients and actually give us more of a talent pool to work from. So I think that there is a big opportunity for us. You mentioned warehouse to wheels. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to try and figure out how we can just continue to build on skills in this high volume staffing to be able to give people more opportunities to work in various different places of the business.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I'll add here too. It's I've been going down the road of looking at aspects of digital recruiting and how technology is being utilized to, help recruitment and talent acquisition. And so, in prep for our session, only 13% of companies in this sector are using quote unquote automated alignment of workers with opportunities to reskill and upskill. So it seems like something that seems to be an issue now, but 67% say they'll have that capability by the end of 2023. So that's, again, one of those things that's, could be a big shift over the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's huge. Chris, I'm going to need you to post all your stats that you've said on this on LinkedIn for all of us. This is pretty impactful things as well. But I know we're coming up at the end of time. I just want a huge, sincere thank you to Adam, Janelle, Todd, and Chris. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you today. Someone told me really, really early in my staffing career that staffing was a noble profession. And I believe it now more than ever before that it truly is. And a huge heartfelt thank you to you and your teams of what you do every single day, the impact that you make on the industry and also the communities that we serve every single day. So big, huge thank you to all of you. Thank you for World Staffing Summit to give us this platform to have this really good conversation. And I appreciate the audience for engaging in questions as well too. So I'm sure you guys are getting flooded by LinkedIn invites to connect. And so I'll leave you to that, but thank you all. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your time today.
Thanks everyone.
Thank
Thanks so
you.
much.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right.